Good morning, afternoon, evening, or the wee hours, whenever you ingest this fine podcast. Welcome to the Firebreak. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, the Firebreak is sponsored by Team Wildfire, developing jet engine-powered technology for applying retardants and suppressants to fires. That sounds exciting and dangerous. Count me in. Well, we've been calling ourselves the Firebreak for a bit, but it turns out that there's another organization that also refers to themselves as Firebreak. They're called Firebreak Risk. And Firebreak Risk is a company that's been co-founded by Kate Stillwell, based on the idea that if you do things to make your home less likely to burn, shouldn't your insurance companies take that into account? Kate, welcome to the Firebreak. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
You bet. So tell me about your Firebreak Risk.
Yeah, just like you said, we recognize the fact that there are lots of folks all doing home hardening, creating fire breaks, particularly in the ember zone, and that significantly reduces their risk of burning down. And therefore, it should be reflected in the availability and eventually the price of insurance.
Okay. And how do you go about it?
Right. So residents will download our app, self-inspect by taking photos and videos, walking around their home. We guide them through a series of photos to take. Then we use AI on the back end to convert those photos and images, which belong to the resident themselves, to convert those into data, and that data plugs into insurance underwriting. So the insurers are licensing the data on the mitigation status. So these are things like, is there mesh on the vents? Are there dead leaves collected in the corners of the house? Is there firewood under the deck? All things that the insurance companies currently don't have any other data source for, because right now they have information from above, from aerial and satellite view, which gives them information on defensible space for the most part, as well as roofs. But there's a data gap, which is why the insurance companies are paying us to be able to access that data and be able to identify which of the residents have done the conscientious good work of reducing their risk proactively so that they're, doing their part with the insurance company.
Okay. So the insurance companies right now are saying, please do all these things to reduce your risk so that we save money when you don't burn up, but we're not willing to pass any of those savings on to you. And you're saying, hey, wait, if
That
I'm
is currently what's happening.
Right. If I'm going out, I'm doing the mitigation, I'm reducing your risk. Yes, there's a benefit to me. My house is less likely to burn down, but you guys are also less likely to pay out. And since my risk is lower, my premium should be lower. And so it goes that way, and it goes the other way too, right? I don't want to pay as much in premiums. Therefore, I'm incented to do these things or to mitigate around my home.
Yeah, and for the most part, the reason people are mitigating their home is to reduce the chances that their home is going to burn down. I don't think there's many people who think it's very practical for that to translate into a lower cost of insurance in the short term, maybe in the longer term.
Okay. So what's the business model then? Are you working directly with consumers, and I guess you're interfacing with insurance companies?
Right.
How's that process?
We're early, and so the app is not quite yet in the App Store. We're still doing beta testing, but the idea is that the app is downloadable by any member of the public, and how we get paid is by the insurance companies for whom it's in their interest to find these conscientious customers who have done the risk reduction themselves. So we get paid by the insurance companies. We're not advertising the insurance on our app. The app is really just giving the advice. But should the insurance companies want to find the customers, then they license our data and our software, and they pay for that to be able to then directly contact these customers and provide insurance.
I see. And what is the app going to be called?
Firebreak Risk.
Good. I'm just giving you a chance to say it again. All right. So how's the development on the app going so far?
It's great. We've gotten a lot of great feedback from folks in Firewise communities, folks in HOAs, where They recognize that the work that they do is benefiting the entire community. You know, every action that reduces the risk at my property actually benefits the entire community. And it makes it less risky for my neighbors. So the folks that already have this sort of collective mindset of we're all in this together. We're doing it for ourselves for sure, but we're also doing it for our friends and neighbors. And so the feedback we've gotten so far are things like, how do we coordinate this advice that we're getting from Firebreak with the advice that we're getting from the fire department inspectors? How do we, what is the relative priority of doing the home hardening versus the defensible space clearing? And those are great questions that we're trying to incorporate in how the app gives the feedback and how the app, what we communicate about what the app can do and what the limitations are and what additional measures that the resident has to take. So we're getting great feedback.
That's good. Is there such thing as like a tag along or ride along effect? Is there a scenario in which I don't do mitigation, but because my neighbor did it, my risk is lowered and therefore my premiums go down?
In practice, not yet. In theory, yes, right? Because the opposite is also true. If my neighbor's house is covered with dead leaves on the roof, then that's a major risk to myself. And so one of the things that I'm really heartened by seeing is that fire departments, I live in Berkeley, California, and the fire department inspections that come around now have a category, not just for routine inspection or compliance-related inspection, but complaint-related inspection. And a complaint can trigger the fire department to come out and do an additional inspection. And so that's really an interesting mechanic that Firebreak hasn't introduced, but nevertheless is part of the risk that we all face.
I see. Okay. So, of course, the best thing is that we all do the mitigation, right? I do it, my neighbors do it. Are there cross incentives? You know, if my neighbor does it and I haven't heard about it, can they come over and say, hey, if you do this, not only, do you reduce your risk of burning, you reduce my risk of burning, and here's a financial incentive that I can pass on to you in the form of this referral coupon or something that you can pass on to your insurance company to show them that you've done the mitigation.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And for now, that incentive is simply the eligibility for insurance. So like, for example, one of our adopters, one of our beta testers is in a HOA in the foothills, Sierra foothills. And, his big problem is he got dropped from insurance and now he's on the FAIR plan and he's done all this mitigation work, but it's not being incorporated into his FAIR plan price. He wants desperately to just get off the FAIR plan and onto regular insurance because the FAIR plan insurance is not sufficient, right? And so when Firebreak is able to offer him insurance, which we're getting very close to being able to connect him with an insurer who can get him off the FAIR plan, then he'll be able to tell his neighbors about it. And so the incentive is, okay, hey neighbors, since we're all in the Sierra foothills together and we're all on the FAIR plan together, this is what I did. These are the actions I took. And therefore, it made me eligible for this insurance company. For now, it's a surplus lines insurer, so it's not just a regular brand name, large insurer. But nevertheless, it's regular coverage, not FAIR plan coverage. And so, if you do it too, you might be able to qualify too. And then, once they're both on better insurance, then they'll get, properly compensated if their homes do burn down, and even better, less likely to burn down in the first place because they've done the mitigation.
Yeah, I think there's not a lot of people who are on the fence on this topic, right? Well, first of all, fences are fuses, so you should never be on the fence in the first place. People are either not thinking about fire, not concerned about it, or they're very passionate about it. So I would think that there would be a huge cross-pollination or marketing opportunity that people who download your software, do the program, tell their insurance company about it. I would imagine that those are going to be your big, loudspeakers for marketing in the community, right? That if I can,
100%, those are our
champions. I do the mitigation, and then I send you a list of the emails of my 10 neighbors that are also interested in it, that you're going to ping them all and try to get them all signed up as well. in the program. So what do they call those? Your brand ambassadors?
Brand ambassadors. Thank you. Yes, that's exactly right.
Right. So I would think that anybody who's using your program is going to want to tell everyone else about it. It
Yes,
further
please. We
diminishes their risk.
would love for folks to shout from the rooftops and find ways to make it worth their while to shout from the rooftops, although we don't know exactly what form that's going to take quite yet.
Right. Well, and they shouldn't just be shouting from the rooftops while they're waiting for the flood patrol to come rescue them from it.
All right.
Just the other side of wildfires, right, which is the flooding that usually follows them when the root systems have disappeared. And it's a big old mess, isn't it? So how did you decide to do this? What was your inspiration for starting this program?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So the first part of my career, I was a practicing structural engineer, so working with architects to design the skeletons of buildings. And my specialty was earthquake-safe design and earthquake retrofits of existing buildings. And I served a term as the president of the Structural Engineers Association, and in that role, participated on public policy committees that looked into disaster recovery and what's the best public policy to make sure that the residents of a community can fully recover from any natural disaster, not just earthquakes, recognizing the earthquake is actually maybe one of the biggest ones to strike California. And realized that safe buildings is really an important spoke of that wheel, so to speak, but there are so many other spokes, and one of the big gaps, big missing pieces is making sure there's enough money flowing in after a natural disaster, and not just earthquakes. And so I went on this other direction in my career that explored, okay, how do we tie insurance to protective measures? How do we connect in a better way the availability of financial resilience to the physical resilience that folks, building owners are already taking, communities are already taking? So my previous startup was a earthquake insurance product that provides parametric insurance at the consumer level and stands to increase the amount of money flowing in after the next big earthquake by a factor of 3. And that was our big goal. We're not quite there yet in terms of how much money would come in after the next big earthquake. But then from there, our customers for the earthquake insurance said, we love this idea because it's different from our regular conventional earthquake insurance. It gives us a jump start on the recovery process because we just get this money with no arbitration. But why are you doing it for earthquake? What we really need this money for is for when the wildfire happens, because we know that it's going to be like a years-long process to deal with our claims adjusters. And what we're going to need is a $10,000 or $20,000 jump start to be able to get our lives back in order. So Firebreak is not providing this parametric, this lump sum immediately after the next wildfire, but it is providing folks the ability to be able to qualify for new and different and better forms of insurance. And so my co-founder, who's based in London, his name is 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭, he said, we built this architecture for this app for inspection. Why don't we apply it to wildfire and create this virtuous cycle, this positive feedback loop between home hardening and new insurance products? And I said, love it. Let's do it. And then a partnership was born and a startup was born.
Wonderful. Tell me about the competitive landscape there. And I say competitive, meaning adjunct, not competing, because I think everybody who is an advocate for wildfire safety is, we're all fighting for the same thing. But by what other means are people accessing this information now, or are they not?
Yeah, so there's folks like Madronas who will, for a fee in the hundreds of dollars, come out and do a very customized white glove inspection and give you a very customized white glove report on what are the top actions you can take to do home hardening in defensible space. And then there's the additional steps of going out and finding the folks to help you take those actions, some of which you can do yourself, but a lot of which are going to need contractors. So So there's like the very, customized approach for the folks who are willing to spend a good amount of money on this issue. And then there's the inspection tools that are being used by fire departments. So, like for example, FireAside is an inspection tool that fire departments use. So when the Berkeley fire inspectors came by and were doing their inspection, they were using FireAside. And then there's a couple others like thinking about this problem, like Allied Defense Services is doing customized inspections. And then there's another startup called Faura, Faura, that allows the residents to do self-inspections like Firebreak, and then connects them with contractors who can help cut trees, for example, and build do the defensible space. And the reason that I want to emphasize, what I want to emphasize by listing all of these other parties in the sandbox, is to say that there are lots of people and lots of good talent working on this very, what seems like an intractable problem, but there's a lot of time and resource and talent. And it's so heartening to see so many other smart people really trying to tackle this. And what it means is that it makes me optimistic that in the medium term, maybe not the immediate term, but the medium term, that there will be some solutions that really make it easy for residents to reduce their risk.
I see. Okay. And so it seems like there'd be a lot of opportunity then for you and some of these other sandbox players to work together. For instance,
absolutely, and that's something we're actively exploring.
Yeah. So you mentioned Fora, and so it sounds like their model is like, the Angie's list of fire mitigation, right? Here's a list of things to look at, and here are the people who can help you fix it, because you probably shouldn't be up on a ladder yourself. Certainly not, at my age. All right, maybe I would, but not if anyone caught me doing it. They'd, get off that ladder or you're going to break a hip. So I'd get a contractor. But then I would also want to get, a reduction in my premium, which would be, something that you would do. And so It's very unlikely that I would want to, know what all the mitigation tools are, and then either not hire someone to do it or not want to get, my premiums reduced. So it seems like that same information, serves multiple purposes. Here in Boulder County,
Exactly.
I call some number and the county sends out a firefighter equipped with some software, and they do what you described as the white glove process, but they do it free of charge. And then if you decide to act on that report, they provide you $500 towards your mitigation expenses. But I don't know if the certificate that they give you, and you get a little road sign and whatnot, I don't know that my insurance company provides any benefit to me for doing that. So that's
right.
I think
And
what we want in the future.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Right
Kate.
now, the departments of insurance in California and Nevada are requiring insurers to offer discounts for home hardening. And that has created a bit of a standoff that has been in the news, and I don't need to regurgitate that. Your listeners can discover for themselves, and maybe they're already familiar with the difficult insurance market in the Western states, but California in particular. But the idea is that mitigation and home hardening should be eligible for discounts. Right now, those discounts that the insurers have proposed to the Department of Insurance are on the order of 1 to 1.5%, even though the scientific research has shown, it's early, the data is not very well populated, but the early research shows that there is a 40% greater likelihood of surviving the fire if your home hardening mitigation is equivalent to the 2008 building code, which is basically the minimum recommendations that are being recommended by fire departments today. So if you've done the home hardening, if you have the mesh on the vents, and if you've done the equivalent of complying with the 2008 building code, you have a 40% more likelihood of surviving. And yet right now the mitigation discounts are 1 to 1.8%. So there's a bit of a mismatch there that's causing a political standoff, so to speak, between the big carriers and the insurance departments. But what that means is that it's leaving an opportunity for the little carriers to come in. And so that's the insurance that we're now being able to connect our users with, is the small insurance carriers who recognize that actually the big insurers are leaving money on the table by not being able to offer insurance to the folks who have done the home hardening. And so even without having to get the rate filing approved by the Department of Insurance, the small carriers, the surplus line carriers, they don't have to get their rates approved by the Department of Insurance. And so they're able to offer this much bigger discount much difference in availability between the customers who have mitigated versus the customers who have not.
So if an end user client, uses either Firebreak Risk software or Fora or some other platform to find out what to do, and then they do it, and then you combine that with intel that you might get from a company like Athena, you could really essentially, prove statistically that you are a significantly lower risk, right? Athena would show that you're in an area that's very unlikely to burn. Plus, you've done the mitigation work. At this point, you should be pretty low risk. And
absolutely, the underwriters love
absolutely
these.
Makes sense. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
You should share in the benefit of that lower risk.
Yep. Absolutely. So the actuaries at insurance companies, it's their job to find the best sources of data and then to mathematically use that data in order to figure out what is the risk. And the more data that they have available to them, the more excited they get about being able to do their job well and provide their insurer with the lowest risk, the lowest risk profiles to customers.
Sure. So other than capital and the need for sleep, what are the obstacles that you face right now?
Yeah, I think the biggest obstacle is the long process of these small insurance companies being able to make the case to introduce new insurance. So right now we're working with an insurance company that is offering homeowners insurance to Gulf Coast customers, so people exposed to hurricane winds. And they're eyeing this opportunity to use the same process of identifying the lowest risk customers that they're using for their Gulf Coast exposed customers and applying that same process of identifying good customers to the Western states and California in particular. But the process of standing up a new insurance offering actually takes a lot of time. And so the ability to deliver on our promise of we'll connect you with good insurance is we're able to deliver on that because we are working with one insurance company that I am able to disclose and be very happy and be their brand ambassador, which is Delos, DELOS. So residents can't buy Delos online, but they can look them up and learn about them and ask their insurance agent and ask us to hook them up with a Delos insurance policy. But right now, Delos is, if not the only game in town, maybe one of the only games in town in terms of these small insurance providers that are able to differentiate between the customers who have done the mitigation. So the biggest barrier, just to recap, is getting more folks like Delos offering this good insurance.
Well, with the intention of rewarding their good behavior, where is Delos available? Are they strictly California right now? Or are they nationwide, or what states do they operate in?
That is a great question that I am not qualified to answer. I know they offer it in California, but it's possible that they offer it in Nevada and other states as well.
Well, I'm going to just browse this right here while we're looking, just to see if it's actually the obvious
real-time information. Love it.
No, I can't. All right. Well, if you have Delos's website, feel free to share.
𝐿𝐮𝐬𝐜𝐫𝐠𝐞𝐭.
𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐜𝐫𝐿.com. That makes sense. Good. I love the idea of what they're doing and the interrelationship between what you're doing and what they're doing. How do you do verification on this? What stops me from calling Delos and saying, I did all the work? Do I send photographs? Do they send someone to look? How do they know that my risk is actually lowered?
Well, that's the connection that Firebreak offers, is that since the customers have done the self-inspection, then we convert those images into data, and those data populate the spreadsheet that the underwriters use. So the underwriters have criteria, things like, is there mesh on the vents? Are the, are there dead leaves? All the same things I said before. Are there dead leaves in the corners? Is there firewood under the deck? And so it's a series of checkboxes that fits into their spreadsheet. And so in addition, Delos in particular is going to send out their own inspector to fill in the other blanks, so to speak, on the underwriting criteria, some of which relate to defensible space. But that's really the magic or the secret sauce that Firebreak does, is to convert these images. So the app is one thing, but a self-inspection app is a dime a dozen. But the magic is making this data that goes through the pipelines that fits into the data needs, the data gaps of the insurance underwriting.
Okay. So are there, increments along the way that photograph would show? Or is it just, yes, no, you mitigated the leaves, yes or no? Or is it, how well you did it? You left a couple leaves there too, I noticed.
So thank you for asking. And some of the questions are yes, no, and some of them are ranked, have like a score of 1 to 5, so to speak. And then there's a process of combining all of the criteria into a total mitigation score. So it's not a total risk score because it doesn't incorporate the hazard like from Athena, and it doesn't incorporate the defensible space. But it is a mitigation score that we can provide if the underwriters don't already have their own algorithm for making a mitigation score themselves. And the second thing I'll say is that the residents have opportunities, unlimited opportunities to improve their score, to do more actions, take new pictures, and then and repopulate the data that the underwriters have.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. If once I've sent it in, that you can basically look it over and say, is this your final answer? You might want to revisit questions 7, 9, and 14 and tell me if you're able to do better on those, right? And so that's great. So you do give them feedback that allows them to further improve their score there. Is it completely
that's
app?
Actually, one of the pieces of functionality. Sorry.
Go ahead.
That score improvement is one of the pieces of functionality that our beta testers are testing right now and giving us feedback on the process and how intuitive it is.
I see. And what's the early feedback?
The early feedback is the process needs to be smoother. It needs to be more intuitive. It needs to, but that's just part of software development and app development, is continuously taking in this user feedback and making updates to the software.
Okay. Are there instances where something more than an app would be helpful? I can call somebody and ask them a question. I know that doesn't give you all the efficiencies of software, but it might give the customers more of a little bit more hand-holding in the process.
Very, very good point. And we recognize that there is a lot of people who don't necessarily want to use an app. They can use an app, but it's not their preferred way of communicating, right? And so in that case, one of the other pieces of functionality that we're actively working on is how do we purpose the app in a way that a centralized person in the community can be the one using the app, but also be sort of the point person answering questions for other people in their community.
Okay, great.
So the example that we have is that there's, in a FireWise community, there might be a person who's like a super champion of fire safety and who's organizing the application for the Community Wildfire Preparedness Plan grant, the FEMA funding for mitigation, and is, kind of doing the role of community organizing, right? And so that person knows that, okay, the people at this, and this address will have, they know all the community members. So they know that these folks will be able to do their self-inspection with the app. But actually, these folks over here, maybe they're, less trustful of technology, or maybe it's less easy for them, or maybe they're just people who really like to talk, right? And so then the community organizer will be able to walk through the inspection with that person and do the inspection on their phone, but for this other person's address, and then show them on their phone, okay, the app came back with these as your top recommendations. So it noticed that there was some dead pine needles in your gutter. And maybe you don't want to get up on the ladder and do that, but you know what? I bet your neighbor will do that for you if you want, or you could hire somebody. And so it's a very good point. And at this point in time, the options for Firebreak users would be to have their neighbor or their advocate do it, or for them to call and hire somebody else that does provide this white glove service for a fee, like Madronas.
I could just see I could just see things going wrong there. I have an opportunity to reduce my insurance premiums by 1.5% by doing this mitigation, but I can't get up on the ladder. I invite my neighbor over, and he goes up on the ladder for me. He falls off the ladder, and now my insurance goes up 20%. Never know.
Okay, well,
hopefully that's not the case, but it would be a reason to advocate for using using professionals to do the work when possible, that have their own that show up on your property with their own insurance, right? But the fact that something happened on your property. So the other thing is, I'm guessing, is you have these two, right? The younger you are, the more likely you are to use apps, but the less likely you are to own a home. And the older you are, the more likely you are to own a home, but the less likely you are to use an app. So I guess you have to get as you said, a model where people who are accustomed to using apps are doing the hand-holding for the people who own the homes, but not necessarily are, app friendly. So that's, what do you call that central person in the community that you described, that, they hold the phone and they do the thing, and I get the benefit, and I guess they get paid for that.
Yeah, it's an open question whether they get paid or whether it's part of the volunteering that they're doing within the community, right?
Okay.
So in an HOA, it might be the maintenance person. In that case, it's part of their job, right? For a neighborhood or who has organized and created a FireWise community, it might be the person who has been in touch with the fire department and who is writing the CWPP grant, right? And that person is probably donating their time.
Okay. It seems like there'd be another opportunity on the mitigation front, and that would be for people who are doing community service instead of paying the jaywalking ticket or something like that. But in order to do that, they would have to be doing that through an organization. So are nonprofit organizations set up right now to take in volunteer labor and then sign off on someone's hours? Because I imagine that that's a pretty big source of free labor, of people who would actually like to be doing something good for the community while meeting the requirements of a community service order.
Great idea. Thank you for sharing that idea. We don't have it in our roadmap quite yet, but now we do. So thank you.
Super. Yeah. But they have to work through an organization that can sign off on that. So interesting. Well, I'm just fascinated at the continuous sprouting of new ideas, new apps, new strategies to deal with this problem. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about this is, you described the wildfire problem as an intractable situation. But I think whenever you have a situation like this, for some people, it's more of an exciting challenge that they feel invited to than a problem that they're simply faced with. So I feel that you're very much in that camp.
Absolutely. It's a tough problem to solve, but sometimes the most gratifying problems are the ones that are tough.
Right. If it was easy, anyone would do it, right?
Right.
Kate, thank you. I want to thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It was really fascinating to hear what you're working on.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Kate Stillwell, co-founder of Firebreak Risk. Kate, do you have a website that you'd like to have people visit to learn more about what you're doing?
Our website is firebreakrisk.com, and that is probably the best way to learn more about us and check us out until the app is released. So thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, so firebreakrisk.com. Check that out, see what they're working on. Hopefully they'll have an app out to you very shortly. Maybe the app will even be out by the time this episode airs. So no pressure, Kate, but I can push this back just a little bit if you need to. So that's Kate from Firebreak Risk. Coincidentally, learning about it right here on The Firebreak. I'm Steve Wolf. The Firebreak is sponsored by Team Wildfire. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. Until then, mitigate and be careful out there.